Hello, left fielders. At LFI, you know our focus is on networking and education. Mark your calendars because we're going to have a full day of it dedicated to you, our limited partners, at the Best Ever Conference on April 9th in Salt Lake City. Left Field Investors is opening the BEC with Passive Investing Mastery, an event focused on passive investors. This will be where insightful content meets passionate LP investors. If you enjoyed BEC last year and the meetup in left field this year, imagine them both back to back. The Best Ever Conference isn't just any event. It's the premier conference for commercial real estate investors and operators. Your ticket to Passive Investing Mastery includes admission to the entire Best Ever Conference from April 9th through the 12th. Join us April 9th, where we will have a packed agenda with sessions focused on how to be a successful limited partner led by experienced LPs, top operators, and partners. Then immerse yourself in the full Best Ever Conference, where you will be surrounded by like-minded investors, operators, and industry experts for unparalleled opportunities for learning and networking. The best part, and there are so many, but the best part, you won't find a bigger discount on the regular ticket price than the one you get for being an infielder. That's more content for an exclusive lower price. Register for the event today at leftfieldinvestors.com/BEC, and we will see you at Passive Investing Mastery, presented by Left Field Investors at the BEC.
You really should know who's running the ship, because people out there celebrate getting the deal, which is fine, but the real work starts once you have the deal under contract and you close on it. For me, that's the fun part, like extracting massive value out of a deal. And you really got to know who's leading the charge. And if the company is strictly focused on doing deal after deal after deal, probably their focus is not on asset management, and they're going to be hurting when the tide changes, which it has.
Investing in syndications can be a daunting task. Wiring a large sum of your hard-earned money to someone you talk to on the phone for 30 minutes can certainly be scary. How can you be confident in what you are doing? Steve Su, one of the founders of LFI, just published a book called Avoiding Rookie Errors as a Left Field Investor, 20 Lessons Learned from 14 Years of Passive Investing in Private Syndications. This is the best passive investing book I've read. It's easy to read. It's chock full of great advice from Steve's experience as a passive investor. Whether you're a first-time passive investor or a veteran, you can learn from these lessons. You got to read this book. Get the link to Avoiding Rookie Errors as a Left Field Investor on our website today at www.leftfieldinvestors.com. Hello, left fielders. Welcome to the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast. Our community is focused on networking and education to help people invest passively and think differently. Let's go. I'm excited today to have Gary Lipsky with us. He is a multifamily syndicator who's done over $250 million in real estate transactions. He is president of Break of Day Capital. He's the host of the Real Estate Investor podcast, and he's a best-selling author of the book Best in Class. Gary, welcome to the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast.
Jim, happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you. I've been looking forward to this. The first thing I'd like to kind of start is with your journey. How did you get into real estate? How did you become an operator in multifamily? And just kind of tell us how you got to where you are today.
So I bought my first house for my family, 2002. I just had a kid, and I was looking for the right neighborhood. I had no money to put down. I was in debt, and so I had to find a house that, wasn't necessarily the nicest, but, in the path of progress. And we bought this house. We converted the garage to an office space. So I was able to collect rent. And we opened up the kitchen. It was a value add play, and I didn't realize how that would have such an impact in my future. And eventually, I bought a single family rental. We moved from one house to another, and we turned that into a single family rental. I was looking at some small properties, but eventually I sold a business at the end of 2016 and got into real estate full time and partnered with some other people. And we took down a 42 unit in Tucson for $1.65 billion. And I should have bought the whole block at that price, you know. But it was our first foray and into the business. And I applied my business skills. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. My previous business, we ran outdoor education, after school programs, and leadership development. We worked with 9,000 students daily at 90 schools throughout Southern California. So each school was like its own multifamily property to me, because I had an on-site staff. We had to add value every single day. And so it was, you know, the same skills I'm applying to real estate. I know it's a little bit different, but, you know, managing people, managing projects, executing on our business plan, to maximize value.
So back to the beginning, when you kind of started with the single family rental, it sounds like you guys moved and kept the old house as a rental, that's how I got into it. I did it on accident. You might have done it more intentionally. And then you said you sold that business. And then the next thing was you went out and bought a 42 unit apartment. So was there any real estate in between there? Were you continually buying single family? I guess the question is, how did you know, hey, I want to go buy 42 units is large for a guy who's been doing single family, but how did you decide, hey, this is where we want to go, let's do multifamily and let's do larger projects?
So when I sold that business, really the first year was looking at all the different options in real estate, you know, because you get the squirrel factor, you know, that looks good, this looks good, that looks good. So I had to narrow my focus. So I started investing in other people's deals. And so that kind of gave me an insight of what to do right and what to do wrong. I mean, I wish there was a left field at that point, you know, to help guide me, you know, because I was kind of going at it blindly, and I invested with people that, you know, had a social media presence, had a meetup, but they didn't really understand operating. And after we sold that deal, or he sold that deal, he admitted that to me and was like, you know, he just became a capital raiser because he's not an operator. So, I learned a lot of things along the way. But, you know, I found multifamily, and then I honed in on that and really studied and, you know, underwrote, you know, a ton of deals where, you know, I'd look at properties, you know, from, you know, early in the morning till late at night. And it just gave me those reps to feel comfortable and partnering with others to go after our first deal. So there was a couple of years in there where we were kind of getting our feet wet, kind of gaining experience, and then we're able to feel comfortable to put in our own money and to bring on investors' capital as well. Okay.
And so that first deal then you did as a syndication, you had investors. So where did you find those investors on your first deal? I'm always curious, you know, when you just start out, you know, you probably have to go to friends and family to start. Is that what you did?
Absolutely. And there's a bit of imposter syndrome, you know, like, I've never done this before at this level. I'm taking money. So I was, quite honestly nervous about going to people and really developing, my emails, my newsletters, which I should have developed many, many months before, telling people what I'm doing. But, you know, so I raised from like 3 people. We raised a tiny amount, but all we had to do was raise $1 million between the 3 of us. But it gave us, you know, confidence to work together, and we got the deal done, and our underwriting was ridiculously conservative. And we were able to 2x that deal in under 2 years.
Wow. That's great. And then since then, have you done larger properties, or are you focusing on the medium, like 46 to 100, or are you going larger now?
So, soon after that, maybe, 4 months later, we took down a deal that was over $15 million. It was 128 units in Phoenix. So that was a big jump. But, you know, we partnered with a few more people, and we took that deal down. And that one was, again, 2x in under 2 years, buying it at the right time, at the right property. But at that point, then we had this big lull because COVID hit. And there was this kind of price discovery that we've been having, you know, the last year or so. So we didn't buy another deal for almost 12 months after that. And then we started getting on a regular cycle. But, you know, buying probably about 4 deals each year the last couple of years.
Okay. And you know, we've talked before, and you're one of the only people that I hear talking about asset management, right? Mostly it's, hey, you're the operator, you're the syndicator, you're a capital raiser, whatever that person is, and then there's a property manager. But you know, the asset manager is key. And when I was an active investor, I didn't realize that I was the asset manager, right? I thought that the property manager just handled everything for me, and that's why we always butted heads, and that's why I was really bad at being an active investor, and that's why I do passive now. And when I look at an operator, I'm thinking of them as they're going to be the asset manager. They're going to manage that asset. So can you talk to us, what is the difference between an asset manager and all these other guys, operator, syndicator, GP, capital raiser? Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're not. But can you just talk about what's an asset manager and what's the difference between an asset manager and those other roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So an asset manager really executes on the business plan, and they hold the property management team accountable. The property management team has 30, 40, hundreds of properties. They punch in, they punch out. There's no skin in the game for them, really. So the asset manager has to motivate the team, has to get ownership thinking, has to go through all the financials on a regular, on the monthly basis, and have those weekly property calls. And so many other operators don't allocate the enough time and money to asset manage a deal. And that's a huge difference in value that you can create, because if you can have a regular deal maybe 90% occupied and you're not having all the income lines, but a well-managed property, you can execute on your business plan much faster. So that's why we're able to exit 3 of our properties within 2 years at a massive return, because we've executed on our business plan, because we held the team accountable, because we had the KPIs laid out nice and simple for them. And we would secret shop the property. We would drop in on the property unannounced. We don't always say, hey, we're coming by, get everything nice and ready. It's all these little things, setting up the right, expectations from the very beginning with our property management team. And they know, like, we're going to be a handful. We're going to be, they're going to talk to us a lot more than they talk to their other operators, because we're going to be hands-on. Now, we respect their input. I mean, they're the experts on the ground. They're in that submarket every single day. So I want to hear their expertise, and I value that. But we're going to hold them accountable to what we want to achieve, and we're going to stay on top of them. Preferably not micromanage them. We're going to give them room to operate, but they better hit our numbers. And this way we've been able to extract a ton more value out of all of our deals than your typical operator.
Now, is it an assigned role? So again, you get kind of confused with the terms operator, syndicator, all that. So it's the operator. It's the one that is actually operating the deal. They could also be the GP and the capital raiser, but is there one person that's assigned and say, hey, you are the asset manager? I see in the fees, there's an asset management fee, and that's about the only discussion you have on it. Oh, there's a fee. Okay, off we go. Right. But we don't really understand what do they do and who is that person. And so I guess the question is it one person or is it a team? And how does it all kind of come together?
Yeah. So when we started out, I had a business partner, and so we'd both kind of asset manage it. He would have some properties that he would be the key person on. I would be the key person on other properties. Then when I developed my own team, I have a person assigned to that task. Now I oversee a lot of the calls and all the paperwork as well. It's always good to have 2 eyes on something, but he's the lead in making sure everything is performing on a weekly basis. He's the one evaluating all the KPIs. So on my team, I have someone specifically assigned to that. Some, the institutional buyers, they'll have that. But a lot of the other syndicators, they should have someone on their team They may not. It might be, like you said, it might be the operator / syndicator. I've seen deals with so many co-GPs on a deal. They might break it up on one person's on construction, one person's on renovation, one person's on something else, and they split up all the tasks. I don't think that's a great way to go, because I want my property manager and regional manager to have like one point of contact and not hear voices from all different places. Now, anyone that's a partner with me can be on those calls and feed information through my asset manager. But we want to have one point of contact for that, and one person leading the charge. That, to me, that's the best practice.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And having someone who's designated as asset manager just really focuses, right? Because their only job, I presume, is focus on the business plan and execute, right? Where if you have all these other jobs that you're doing and that's one of your jobs, you might not focus on it as much. Is that how you've found it to be, where there's one person, you give them that title and then they know their job and so their job gets done?
Absolutely. And asset management is harder than ever, not because the loan covenants are so much stricter. You've really got to know, if there's earnouts, if there's penalties, you really got to know your loan covenants. Reporting is a lot more time consuming than it used to be. So there's a lot of work involved in asset management. And so you've got to make sure you allocate, the resources to that so that you can perform at a high level. And when you don't, you get into these issues where you haven't executed on your business plan. Maybe you have to do a capital call, and you're behind on your business plan, and you're going to be really hurting on that right now.
So you mentioned property management, right? One of the big jobs of the asset manager is to oversee property management. And I can see how that would work. Well, either way, but if you're hiring out a third-party property manager, then it's pretty clear. I'm the asset manager. You're the third-party property manager. You report to me. I tell you what to do. A lot of companies over the last few years have converted to where they have all of their property management in-house. How does that change the role of the asset manager? And could it be in a situation where someone just says, well, since you're the PM and you're internal, now you're the asset manager too? And if so, are there downsides to that?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot if I want to do in-house, and I don't. I want to be more nimble. I want, we hire a company that all they do is in our Tucson market, all they do is Tucson. They've been there for 35 years. They have all the vendor contacts. I can rely on them for their expertise. For me, that's a whole nother business, and it's an HR nightmare. I don't want to have that. So if you have it internally, yeah, you may not have an asset manager. And if you don't, then yes, you're just dealing with your property manager, maybe your regional. But it's good having that kind of, third party, which is that asset manager to kind of, again, hold that property manager accountable and hold that regional, accountable, because they've got many other properties. They're employees, not, they don't have that same ownership thinking. And so having someone that's their job is to maximize NOI and execute on that business plan is really important, whether you have in-house property management or third party.
And I want to get into a little bit on how an LP, a limited partner, the investor, should look at all of this. So the first part of that is, as an LP, should I be asking someone whether they have property management in-house or not? Should I say, hey, who specifically is your asset manager on this deal? And should they be part of my interview process when I'm looking at a new operator?
Yeah, I think those are great questions. And I don't think an investor has ever asked me that before, So yeah, you really should know who's running the ship, because people out there celebrate, getting the deal, which is fine. But the real work starts once you have the deal under contract and you close on it. For me, that's the fun part, like extracting massive value out of a deal. And, yeah, you really got to know who's leading the charge. And if the company is strictly focused on doing deal after deal after deal, probably their focus is not on asset management, and they're going to be hurting when the tide changes, which it has.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened, right? There are a lot of companies out there, and I've invested with some of them who essentially were apartment flippers. And that's okay if you understand the business plan. And you're right, they weren't really focusing on the asset other than to make it pretty to sell to somebody else, which is great if you're just in it to make money, but it's not sustainable until something happens like it just did. So that's a really great point. As far as the LPs again, what questions should we ask a sponsor or an operator, I'm using those interchangeably, in order to determine if they are a good asset manager, right? We want to make sure that we have questions that say, hey, that they can kind of suss it out. Like, are you kind of just going along with it? Or are you critically, looking at asset management and making it a critical part of your evaluation?
Yeah, I would ask, what that asset management does on a day-to-day basis. How many properties do they asset manage? Because if they're doing maybe more than 10, maybe that's too much. What kind of KPIs are you looking at? Maybe they could share their dashboard. I think that's important. How often are you talking to your property management company? Now, the first 6 months, they should be talking to their property management company on a weekly basis. I still like those weekly basis, even after we performed on the deal. We just moved one property that we've owned, almost 30 months to bi-weekly. But, I even said I'd prefer to have that weekly, but there's just, we have a couple minutes, like we've already executed, we're refinancing the property. But just having that Zoom, that 5 minutes interaction, certainly it's going to be longer for a newer property because you have more to do. You get a lot of information there. So that's important. I would also ask how often that asset management visits the property. Because I know a lot of other operators out there, that visit their properties every 6 months, every 9 months, which is way too long. You need to have eyes on the property. You need to build that relationship with the team, to let them know that you care about the property and you're going to drop in at any moment. And they need to manage that way, not to scare them. You actually want to catch them doing something good, but they need to know that this property better be operating to its best at all times.
And what can the LP do? This is the most difficult part as an LP, right? You do all the research, you do all the due diligence, then you send in your money, and now you got nothing, right? You can't do a thing except read a report or hopefully collect some distribution. So during the hold period, what can the LP do to keep up with the asset manager, to know what's going on with the property, aside from the reports they get? Because again, we're making a little distinction between the asset manager and maybe the investor relations person, right? So is there anything that you recommend people do? Talk to the asset manager during the hold, or if there's capital calls, is the asset manager the person you want to talk to? You're always, you're usually given to the IR person. So should you dig deeper, I guess is the question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what we like to do is have a semi-annual call to kind of go over all of our properties. So the whole team is there. We can answer questions. We talk about the good and the bad. I mean, never, nothing ever goes perfectly. So you do have, bumps in the road that you have to discuss. So hopefully, if you're an LP and you're investing in other people's deals, that they're having those opportunities to talk to the team and ask questions. The newsletters are providing all the information. It's important that they should have the actuals versus the budgeted to the pro forma. And so I know the budgets may change over time, but we keep to our pro forma so that investors know, hey, we're beating it, we're behind, and if what's causing the variation. It's never like a perfect straight up arrow. I mean, most months we beat our pro forma, but there's some months that we're behind. And so we just have to communicate what's going on. And so hopefully, whoever you're investing with is sharing all that information. And, I hear from other investors that, when things get rough, that's when, the communication starts lagging. And that's the opposite of what you should be doing. You should be doubling down on your communication. But yeah, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that an LP can do, but hopefully, when they're investigating a potential operator to invest with, their communication is getting back, right away without too many delays and fully answering the questions. And if they do that, I think that's a pretty good sign of how they're going to communicate down the road. But if it's taking a long time, if they're not answering certain things or blowing certain things off, then maybe that's not the type of company that you should be investing with.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. So I want to shift a little bit. We've been talking mostly about asset management, but you have been, and I think maybe you still are, focusing on value add with the multifamily. Can you talk about, because that means something different to each person, it seems, and it certainly has changed over the last couple of years. So can you talk about what value add means to you and how you look at it when you're evaluating a deal, whether you want to go ahead and make an offer on that deal?
Yeah. So we have a deal right now under contract, and we looked at their water bill and realized it was more than twice as much than what we're paying on our other similar sized properties. And so, are there leaks? What's going on there? So we actually saw a picture of their toilet that was 3.5 gallons. And so we know it wasn't low flow. So then the question was, do they have low flow on other units? And they didn't. So we know that we can install aerators on faucets and shower heads and low flow toilets and save $138,000 on this property at a minimum. And when you divide it by the cap rate, that's almost $3 million of value that we can create day one. So that's one thing. Two, I want the look of the property. So we'll address landscaping. Typically, you own a property 3-5 years, your landscaping isn't going to keep up. Maybe your painting isn't going to keep up. And that adds a lot of value. And I know it doesn't, you can't say, oh, it's going to increase the rents, but it actually does. By having a really nice look to the property, particularly from the road, stuff like that adds a lot of value. Adding amenities that don't cost a lot of money. Maybe we've done pergolas a lot of times on our property over the barbecue grills. That's a low cost amenity that adds a lot of value. Package lockers, dog parks. So things like that can add a lot. Also on this new property under contract that we have, they have patios on the first level, but there's no privacy wall. So we can add a privacy wall and charge $50 a unit. So 128 units times $50 times 12 months. That's a lot of value that we can create. Preferred parking too, that we can institute. So, we could pick out a couple of different spots throughout the property and add $20 cost to that so that someone could park very close to their apartment. Now, everyone's not going to do that, but some people are going to do that. And again, that's adding more income lines. Maybe they have an extra person on staff that they shouldn't have. Now, I'm not trying to weaken the team, but sometimes they just have too many people sitting around that we can lose a person and save, $50,000. So there's a lot of different levers that we look at. We can't do everything all at once. So we have to, move a few levers. Once that's done, move another few levers. And we're constantly tweaking and evaluating the property to add value. We've also done 2 adaptive reuse projects that we bought student housing during COVID. It was at 52% occupied. We converted it to market rate, multifamily. By the summer, we were over 90% occupied. So that property, we've owned a little over 2 years. We're refinancing it out. Our investors have had cash flow and they'll get 100% of their money back, because we've added, we've doubled the value of that property and we'll just sell at a more opportune time. And then we also bought a garden office space in Phoenix. We got 44 units out of the existing build and we're adding 60 new units. And we'll be done with that project in a few months. So again, it's kind of a needle in the haystack. We saw a ton of value in this deal. And the lender's like, why are you buying this at $1.9 million? It's been sitting on the market for 12 months. And we're like, because we can convert it to multifamily and our basis is going to be, tremendous and extract millions and millions of dollars of value by converting it.
So can you talk more about adaptive reuse and how you find those and what exactly is it? And then how you find them, because those seem to be like you can really extract value there, right? The value add there is huge because you're changing what it is from one thing to something else. And it really is just all about your vision, right?
Yeah. So that student housing deal, that was pretty simple to do. We were under a time frame. They wanted us to close within 45 days. So I needed to make sure all the boxes checked before we, our money went hard, and then we knew that we can raise the money. And so we jumped on with a bunch of different lawyers and the city of Tucson to get that approved. But the other project, again, we immediately reached out to the city and they were super cooperative. They wanted this rundown office space converted because it means a lot more tax money to them. So they quickly worked us through the system to get those approvals. This was more of a simple project. I have friends that are doing these massive buildings that are historic, and they're getting grant money. They're getting all these different tax incentives to get them to where they need to be within the cap stack. We didn't have to do that for that project, but a lot of them are really hard to pencil. I mean, we looked at a lot of hotels to conversions, and obviously the rooms are small, and so you either have to add 2 rooms together or get like a suite to make it work. We're not putting a ton of our resources into that. We want more, I guess, doubles. So the 2 projects that we picked were easier for us to handle. We're not taking on massive adaptive reuse projects, but you're seeing in New York City there's grant money for those for office space. And I assume more cities will do that as well. Probably San Francisco, they're going to need to do something like that to convert these massive apartment buildings or raise them and convert to multifamily or retail or whatever it is.
Yeah, so that makes sense. And you mentioned several times that you're in the Tucson market, and everybody's in Phoenix, Houston, Dallas, and it always intrigues me when I find somebody who's in a market that not very many, in our community, our syndicators, the people that we know, not many people are in Tucson. So what's different about Tucson? Why are you in Tucson, and what makes it a place that LP should want to invest in?
It's funny. So the first time I was looking at the demographics and I drove through it, I was not impressed at all. But we bought our first deal, and the more time I spent in there, I realized how much value there was to be had, because we bought our first property. The owner probably hadn't visited there in years. It drastically needed paint. They had the wrong phone number on the wall, for property management. It was just so poorly run. We raised rents like 50% and everyone stayed. I was shocked. And that seemed to be the case on a lot of these other properties. It's over 1 million MSA, a really diverse, job market, good steady population growth, good rent growth, and one of the lowest cost of living cities in the States. And it's very business friendly. So very landlord friendly. So if someone's not paying, we could quickly get them out. And so those are the factors that I really liked about the city. I think a lot of owners like to visit Scottsdale and Phoenix, but they don't come to Tucson. So we're getting properties where we can add a ton of value because they just don't know where the rents are and fall asleep at the wheel. Now, certainly they've made a lot of money, but when I buy it from them, I'm able to extract a ton of money as well in a very short period of time.
Are there other markets like that? I mean, maybe you don't want to say it out loud because everybody else will jump in there. But, I really am always intrigued when someone finds something like this. I think Birmingham and some of those Alabama cities were like this for a while, but now there's a lot more people there. Same with some of the, Arkansas and some of those places. So are there other markets like this that you're looking at? And how do you find them? How did you find Tucson?
Yeah. So, first my focus was on Phoenix, to be honest with you. and this was before the massive growth. We're talking like 2017, 2018. But they are hard to find. You have to spend a lot of time in that market and really understanding it, talking to brokers on a consistent basis, because we stumbled into it. It wasn't like, okay, I was focused on Tucson in the very beginning, but I'm thankful that I did stumble upon it. But we're looking in concentric circles. So we're looking in Vegas, which is more like a Phoenix, Albuquerque, which I guess is more like a Tucson. But we don't do the shotgun approach. We want to be in a small radius that we can visit on a consistent basis. Our underwriting might be different than Tucson compared to Phoenix. Now, Phoenix is going to have more delinquency, more vacancy right now. So I think there's opportunity everywhere. It just all depends on how you underwrite. But yeah, finding those markets that people sleep on. I know, the Midwest has been hot of late because people were falling asleep on it and putting all their investments into Florida and Texas. And eventually, the rents they were paying catch up in the Midwest, and there was a lot less competition. Now, I think those are hot markets right now. And then maybe it goes back to, the Southeast and Texas, but, there's ebbs and flows. And I think being a market expertise will always, have you ahead of the game versus taking a shotgun approach and looking at too many markets. Just pick a few, develop those strong broker relationships, and consistently execute in those markets, and you'll do fine. You'll really minimize your risk.
Yeah, and especially if you can find some markets that aren't as crowded as the Phoenix, Dallas, Florida market. So that makes complete sense to me. So the last question I always ask is, what is a great podcast that you like to listen to? And you cannot use Real Estate Investor Podcast. That is your podcast, and we'll put that in the show notes for sure. But what's another podcast you like to listen to?
So Walker and Dunlap has a podcast on a weekly basis, and it's really good. They have Peter Linneman. They have a lot of economists. They have a wide range of people that is really valuable. So I can look at, different angles, business people that have done, tremendously well. So I like the broad range of topics, and just really, really insightful.
Yeah, I listened to that one. I forget where I heard about that one, but it's excellent. Really great guests, and they really kind of dig into it. So that's an excellent recommendation. Thank you very much. If listeners want to get in touch with you, learn more about Break of Day Capital, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, go to our website, breakofdaycapital.com. You can get our social media links. You can get on our newsletter. You can see what deals we're offering. So that has LP resources as well. So how to vet a sponsor, how to track all of your investments. So a lot of good free resources on the website.
Excellent. We'll put all that in the show notes. And Gary, this has been fantastic. We appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the podcast.
Some really good stuff there with Gary. Appreciate him being on the show. As I said, he's really the only person I hear talking specifically about asset management. And I think that's a big deal. I know other people, other operators, they do asset manage. Obviously, that's the whole deal. But he really has a singular focus on that. And I think it probably makes a difference. And it just means that there's more specific focus on making sure the property manager's doing their job, making sure they're working with the banks, making sure all of this stuff, it's like herding cats probably being the asset manager, but it's a really important job. And I like the focus of it. Gary mentioned, one of the ways that he learned some things about how to be an effective syndicator is he invested in other deals as an LP, and that gave him great insight. And so that's one of the things I always like to hear from an operator, is that they invest in other people's deals. And that's for multiple reasons. But one of them is because then I know that they're seeing what other people are doing, and they're either, they're probably seeing some stuff that they really don't like. And so they make changes maybe in their own program. And then they see stuff that they really do like, and they take that and enact it. So I think it's really powerful and important to have operators who are investing in other people's deals. I think it was really smart of Gary to use that as a learning experience. And back to the asset manager, he talks about, what does the asset manager do? They execute the business plan. They manage the PM. Well, if you have a business plan and you don't have anybody that is totally focused on executing it, or as Gary said, you split it up into multiple people, then you're going to lose focus and not be as efficient. And so it seems like concentrating on that one thing, who's going to execute the business plan, it makes you keep going back to that business plan that hopefully the operator spent so much time putting together to make sure that they would achieve their goals. Well, if you don't go back and look at it, guess what? You're not going to remember what's in it. You're not going to achieve that. And then he talked about adaptive reuse, and I really like that. It's where you take an asset, like he said, student housing, and you turn it into a multifamily. And what it does is it's a mismatch in price sometimes, where if somebody's trying to sell something as a student housing, it's going to be priced differently and everyone's going to react to it differently than if they're thinking about it as a multifamily property. And so if you find something that maybe no one's buying it as a student rental because the economics don't make sense, maybe you can buy it for cheaper and turn it into a multifamily, and you already have some built-in equity from that conversion. Now it's a heavier lift on the value add, so you got to make sure you have all your procedures in place. But it's really interesting, and we see that in the motel to apartment conversions for sure. And self-storage, also you see it when they're taking these big Kmart boxes like Nomad is and converting them to self-storage. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Adaptive reuse is something I think, especially with so much need for affordable housing, that this is going to be a wave of the future. So I think that's really interesting. And again, it does have a big upside. And then the last thing we talked about was Tucson as a market. And I'm always interested when somebody is outside of where everybody else is going, some of these tertiary markets, smaller markets maybe. But if you get in there, you can really make a difference and make some money because nobody else is really focusing there. And you're dealing, as Gary talked about, with all these guys who've owned the business for 20 years. So they've extracted all the value out of it that they're going to get. So they don't mind selling it to you where you're going to go ahead and double the value in a short time because they've already gotten all the value out of it and they don't want to do that heavy lift. I know that because that was me on one of the smaller multifamilies I owned. I knew I could make a bunch of money, but I didn't have the energy. I'd already made my money on it. So I sold it to a buddy. He doubled the value in a year and we both came out with huge smiles. So that's why I like hearing people that are in markets like Tucson or some of these. He mentioned Albuquerque. I don't know anything about Albuquerque, but that would interest me because I don't know a whole lot of other people going in there. There's still a lot of due diligence to do on the operator and the market. Don't just jump in because it's a new market you've never heard of or never been to, but it's just interesting to me when we find someone that has that. So great talking to Gary. We appreciate him and we'll be watching him as we move forward. That's all we have for this time. We'll catch you next time in the left field.